what is competitive burlesque? What is the basis of competition?
Yes, it is a question that I wondered how controversial it would even be. Because, like, I'm sure some people would say burlesque isn't sports.
Right.
That's wild. The best analogies I can think of, because you can make a rubric for it. You can
Hmm.
like make a template for how you might judge someone, and it's very similar, I guess, in some ways to like figure skating or gymnastics, where there's like a technical element and an artistic element,
Uh-huh.
and all kinds of it gets pretty funny sometimes because it can be very serious. Like,
Uh-huh.
yes, there's the burlesque hall of fame and they get first, second, and third or whatever, and you
Mm.
have your kind of person for the year that showed that they were the most entertaining, which is part of the artistic part.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, like you can do that, but there's also things like, I don't know if I can swear here, but
You can.
master of tassels, master of assholes, like
Uh-huh.
there's all kinds of competitive, like little sub things, like
I
sub
see.
competitions, even under the larger competition. So there's a lot of potential and
Okay.
people find a way. But it is like, yeah, like how do you judge something that it seems like an art because it is one. And it's also the other analogy that I had was like pro wrestling.
Nice.
Because
I wish I
like,
had somebody who was a pro wrestler that I could talk to about that too, but this will cover it, I'm sure.
yeah, like there's is such an overlapping Venn diagram because it's basically like, well, they certainly look like athletes. Like these are very strong, athletic, professional wrestler people, but
Sure.
clearly it's fake, and
Uh-huh.
made up. And like
Uh-huh.
it's there's an entertainment quality to that I think that's really what sets it apart from sports. But
Sure.
yeah, so it's definitely slippery. It's not like tried and true. I'm sure there's people that would disagree with me, but yeah, definitely like technical, artistic elements. Final answer. That's how
Uh-huh.
you judge burlesque.
Okay.
But yeah, it's much bigger than that. Like, I guess last thing I'll say is like burlesque is very wide, and whereas like other sports, they're like baseball is only a sport,
Mm.
but
Mm.
before burlesque was a sport and people got super serious and competitive about it, it was entertainment.
Uh-huh.
So and other things and lots of other things. So
Sure.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are judges, I'm guessing.
Oh yes, there can be.
And what is their deal?
Usually the judges, they're basically respected elders in the community.
Nice.
They're like the teachers, the people who know the trade, they know the craft, and they have that discerning eye that can tell and be like, all right, if there are some technical things like, you know, um, using your tassels properly, like someone who knows the trade, like any trade, is going to be able to tell.
Uh-huh.
But then, of course, there's a subjective element to it. There always is. But yeah, those are the judges, and
Mhm.
they get invited to judge a competition usually. But that's how that works.
So you respect them, it sounds like, as a performer.
Usually,
Usually.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm sure. I mean, granted, I never got into like the major echelons of stages, the biggest stages, but I'm sure politics come into play.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking of some like figure skating judge that was corrupt like 10 years
Bribed,
ago or
yeah.
something.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't think it's that serious.
So you said that there are like specialized areas of competition, and that it sounds like maybe people sort of zero in on something, performers that is, can zero in on something that they're super good at or just enjoy and try to make that their thing. Did you have such a thing? Do you have such a thing?
Yeah, that is very correct. And this is where like that knowing how wide burlesque is really helpful, because like historically before it was this competitive thing that is very time consuming if you're doing it, very energy intensive. It sometimes was comedy,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it was satire or like political speech.
Mm-hmm.
So like some people really have a skill, like their skill set is storytelling through movement, or just really clever stuff. Like, and some people are like it's like they're the Inspector Gadgets of burlesque, where they've got like bells and whistles and they're doing all kinds of clever ways of getting out of their clothings. And like it's, like, so yeah, those are special skill sets. But I think now, and this is something that really only seems to have come up in the last 10, 15, well, maybe let's just say 20 years, is burlesque moving from something that was pretty soft, like in terms of the amount of movement required, amount of physicality required. And it has kind of been ratcheted up continually over the last couple decades to now, I mean, some of like the quote unquote special skills that people have. I mean, straight up contortionists, people who can do just like acrobatics, straight up acrobatics. There are people who are, will make you think after you leave. But yeah, that, and it was, kind of like how a song has like when you're making a song, it's like there's a verse and a chorus and a verse, and you have kind of that thing that you can do with a song.
Yeah.
The current contemporary landscape of like how someone might make a burlesque routine that might win a competition. It's like you go out there, you do some dancing and moving around, and then you do your special skill, and then you have your finale. So like that's usually how it goes. That's not the equation everyone uses, but the special skill part of it is a really big deal. Like I'm even seeing like circus apparatuses coming in, like sear wheel. Mine was actually the floor and pole. The floor has become its own whole thing, like floor work is what we call it. You can go to whole workshops on floor work now. But yeah, that, because I actually did that before burlesque. Burlesque came later for me. So I took my special skill into it.
I see.
But yes, there are many special skills.
So you were doing floor and pole stuff as like a movement practice. Was it a performance for an audience for you too, or was it like a studio thing?
Both.
And that lent itself, I mean, I can imagine how naturally that lent itself to sort of this bigger world of competitions. And just burlesque in general. And so did you then feel like you had to add like a more theatrical element or like some more like elaborate costuming, or like what was the evolution like to the thing that you would then call burlesque from what you were doing before?
Yeah, that is a really good question, because it definitely was like this evolution or this development over time of taking the skills that I had, which were it didn't require you to interact with the audience necessarily. It didn't require you to have a stage presence all the time, especially if you were just doing your own movement practice privately, like a lot of us or a lot of people in my kind of circles were. But once you do get more into nightlife performance and things, it ended up, I used it kind of as cross training for some of my more competitive pole dancing stuff, where I was noticing that I was doing better in pole competitions because burlesque was improving my stage presence and my ability to be clever and entertaining. So, but when I started, I mean, I didn't have any, like there was a huge learning curve of skills about how you engage with the audience and break that fourth wall. And yeah, just bring them into the performance. That's not the only style. Some people choose to be like, it is a privilege for you to watch me and I am not going to pay attention to you. But I think most of us really, really enjoy that kind of interaction. And that is its own kind of special thing that came much, much later. But I didn't come into burlesque with that at all.
Sounds like you came into it with kind of pure, like I'm thinking about it in just like general athletic terms, like pure skill. Like physical skill type stuff, which from what you're saying sounds like the new way in burlesque.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So it sounds like you might have run into some kind of culture clash at some point, like with people who'd come in from like a pure like song and dance stage kind of approach. Is there like a tension there in the scene?
Yeah, and I think that's pretty accurately descriptive. I think the only missing element there is my like enthusiasm, because I was just like so blown away by burlesque. Like I didn't get into it just because I was like, oh, I'm going to make money, because you don't. Just so everyone's clear on who's listening. But I was just so enthusiastic about it. I was like, this is beautiful. This is fun. This is funny. And it's just like such a powerful means of self-expression. And I knew I really wanted to do that. I wanted to express myself that way. I thought finding a way to somersault out of your pants was the funniest, coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, I have to do that, you know? So yeah, I definitely came in with like this other set of very technical skills that really, it's just one ingredient in the burlesque recipe. And there was a bit of culture kind of catch up with, okay, hey, you can't just go up there as enthusiastic as I am and just roll around on the floor.
Right.
Because thing one, if the stage isn't set up the right way, people literally can't see you because you're on the floor.
Sure.
Yeah. So like there was a bit of a culture kind of learning curve. But a lot of that, I mean, that was the fun of it, was learning that stuff.
Cool. You made brief reference to a scene of people that you were in. Can you tell me more about that? And like, was that sort of your way into the whole thing?
Yeah. I was just trying to, that was the one thing I did do to prepare for this, was I was like, how did I even get into this in the first place?
Yeah.
And I started, I danced earlier in life a little bit, not a ton. I was kind of late to the party. I did like middle school, high school. I was doing a little bit of ballet there. Lost dance for a while. Came back to pole dance in 2014, or came back to dance in the form of the hobbyist kind of pole dancing that was picking up steam, or like the mid 20 teens. And then it was within a couple of years, I had found through the scene, the nightlife kind of scene, which overlapped with the queer nightlife scene, like all of the LGBTQ bars. That is where a lot of like burlesque, go-go dancing, hobbyist pole performance is happening. So I was already kind of part of the queer community in my area. And then I got pulled into go-go dancing for some of the nightlife stuff. And then when I was doing that, by 2016, 2017, like producers were starting to ask me to dance or to do different things. And I was like, oh, okay. And then that was what kind of got me in there.
So it sounds most familiar. Well, it's funny. There's like different parts of my life where I've had sort of analogous scenes going on. And one of them was, let's call it like the enlightened Pacific Northwest strip club scene. And I thought that was going to be the one that was most analogous, but it actually, what you're describing sounds more like the indie music scenes that I've been part of, in that the line between performer and audience is very blurry, and that like the performers are in the audience and like it's whoever's up tonight and people. And is that accurate?
Oh, it is so accurate.
Everybody's sort of an artist and an appreciator at the same time?
Yes.
Cool.
And I actually have a third piece of data, because now in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've become part of the local bluegrass music scene, which is very indie music scene. It's exactly what you just described. It's like, like there's people in the audience and they're going to be up there playing next week. It's very blurry in like the best way possible. It's awesome.
So the thing that's different about like art scenes that I've been in is this competitive nature. I mean, like that's not entirely true. There's always like there's always like a moment where bands have to compete to get on the big stage, or like there's an actual event that is sort of like a judged battle of the bands kind of thing. But it is this sounds kind of harder in a way. In like, this is a leading question, but like it sounds like probably very important to everyone. Like, then this is not exactly different from no, I don't mean the competition. I mean the scene, like being in the scene and just like love and acceptance and feeling comfortable and safe and free to do everything. Like it sounds like a very important part of this mode of expression. So I'm wondering if like competing with one another ever sours that or makes it edgy.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, and I think because you're right, like those are very different vibes, very different. And I think for the most part, like 80% of my burlesque life was not competitive. And that was more described by what you just painted out, was this very supportive, like we're trying new things. Like I have a mentor, like Mercury Stardust is my stage mom. That's where I got my name Claire Moon from, before I was even an astrologer.
Oh, that's good lore. I'm glad to know that.
Oh yeah, that's why. Like, because my stage name was was it was actually named after this regional fizzy water called Claire Moon, or sorry, Claire Brune. And no one could remember it. It was like, Claire Brune, who's Claire Brune? That's like almost a real name. And I was like trying to hide in plain sight because I still had the pharmacy stuff going on. And yeah, Mercury was like, what about Claire Moon? People that can actually remember that, and I can actually say it. And I'm like, let's do it.
Nice.
It took me literally 2 seconds to decide. But yeah, very much like this mentorship, supportive, artistic, indie kind of scene. And I had my mentors, and even trying stuff like, and this is how I got onto this digression, the experimental nature of it, like trying out, you know, telling a certain type of story through burlesque and totally bombing, which is definitely a thing that happens. Or, you know, for instance, I was challenged by my mentor to spend an entire, 4 minutes removing one clothing item. Which is very difficult. And I was like, sure, challenge accepted,
It's starting to sound like Buddhism a little bit. Like annoying things your teachers make you do. Yeah.
Right. And it all to make you like grow, right?
Yeah.
So very like supportive, experimental environment. But yeah, like then we would have these competitions that would come up certain times a year, in certain, like up north in Wisconsin, drive a couple hours, and there was one up there. There's one in Chicago that I performed in. That was my last big thing that I did, I think, in burlesque land, but they only came up a few times a year. Now the smaller competitive stuff was like so silly that even though we were competing, it was not that edgy. People were not that, like, it was based on how much the crowd is cheering for you. And it's like, you're dancing, I'm doing burlesque, and like maybe it's like a variety show, and there's like drag queens over here, and we're all like battling, and like totally different skill sets, and we're somehow battling, and it's all just based on flaws. So no, it's not that serious.
I see. But
the very serious ones where it could get weird, and like, there gets to be sour feelings every once in a while. It happens, but those are so infrequent compared to what it usually is, that even if there was weird stuff with kind of a competitive environment, I think it was diluted enough by the support that it wasn't a deal breaker.
The question that gives rise to for me, though, is at what point for you was there something that you wanted to win? Like it didn't start there. So like what part of you has the nature to compete in this, and how did you know?
I don't even, I mean, I'm like that kind of corny, stereotypical response to that of like, where I'm just competitive with myself, so I am competitive with myself. It is a pressurized enough environment where it kind of pushes you to like a higher standard. And I like that about it. Like, I think that's where the overlap with sports really comes in, is like, these are, especially when you really get into some of the physical stuff with burlesque, I mean, you're training just as hard as a lot of athletes are training.
Sure.
And I was into that. So I was into that. I was into the kind of driven, more pressurized atmosphere of it. And I think those are the things that drew me to it. It wasn't necessarily like, I want to be known as like a gold medal person, or like, I want to have recognition, or, I think my goal has always just been with burlesque and dance is like, can I entertain these people? Are you not entertained? So yeah, if I can just entertain people, everyone's having a good time, like they feel like they got their money's worth, then I've won. Like that's how I win.
Cool. Yeah. I was going to ask you about winning, and it sounds like there is a way in which you can win no matter what the judged result is, because of like the response that you get. But is there, like, I want to know sort of what it has felt like to win. What's the biggest win you ever had, and what was it like to win that?
I think, I haven't like gotten first in a burlesque competition, like a really big, meaningful one, but I did get third. And it was in Chicago, which was like, okay, already I feel like I'm a little fish in a big pond.
That's like a city with a play named after it that's about burlesque.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and I placed third underneath, and there was a good 20 some people at this thing. So that matters. And the person that got second was like a world known German contortionist. And the person that got first, Rosie Roche, they were the master of all of the things. They just cleaned house. Like
Yeah.
they were clearly the most skilled professional of us all. And so the people that I got third underneath, it was like, wow, how am I even in the same pond? And that felt so great. And then another really like memorable one where I actually got disqualified, but I consider it as my biggest win was, long story short, but there was a last minute rule change and I refused to change my choreo. And I went and I did things that I wasn't supposed to do. And I got disqualified knowingly, but they still gave me secretly my first place award behind stage because like that was still really good. And I'm like, yes. So that's great. I don't know if they'll let me back in that competition, but it's fine.